You found the skeleton. How would you tell people that this is you personally? How would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that.
All right, hello everyone. It is me, Dapper Dino, whose channel you're on, as well as Vishanti, who found me some amazing absurdity to go take a look at, which I greatly appreciate because, like, I mean, come on, we're going to talk about giant legends in North America, and Vishanti actually found an entire book about it. We're not going to go through the whole book today. Don't worry. We're not even going to go through all of the stuff that's on the pages we're going to talk about. But we are going to go through a whole bunch of it. So, Vishanti, how did you find this book?
Well, I was, I guess, up in LA for, I think, a friend's, like, book signing or something. And there's a really great bookstore called The Last Bookstore in downtown. And that place, if you've never been, I highly recommend it. Lots of people will name stereotypical touristy things to do in Los Angeles, but I tell almost everyone to go to the Last Bookstore. Just the way that the building is set up, it's like converted from like an old Art Deco, like 1920s era building, and there's all these little nooks and crannies and tunnels and stuff, and there's like, I think, a pseudo bank vault inside.
Interesting.
So, yeah, I was just looking around the different sections, and I happened to find, you know, I guess, cryptids and pseudoscience, and this book
both fun
popped out at me on the shelf, and I was like, oh, giants, okay. And I looked through it, and it purports to be a compilation of various news articles from the last 150 years to talk about giant skeletons and how the Smithsonian covering them all up.
Okay.
So
I think before we get into the book proper, I want to give a little bit of context about the origin of why there's a trope about giants in the Americas. Because there is, in a way that is not entirely connected to, like, Nephilim and the Bible and whatnot, but also isn't entirely disconnected either. So, give me a second while I sip some of this delicious coffee, because my goodness, am I tired today.
The Venerable Bee in the chat is asking, ¿Por qué hablamos castellano?
Also, that's one word.
It just happened to me. Yeah, it is.
Yeah. We're actually not, well, I don't know, look.
Well, por qué, 2 words, is different than the answer por qué.
Right, but he wants the 1 word. Because this is the question, right? Yeah. Oh, yeah, whatever. You know what? Doesn't matter. Okay, it's 2 words, yeah. Yeah. Anyway, the answer is because it seemed funny. That's it. At one point, we were discussing this, and Vishanti said Gigantes, and I was like, nah, yeah, I'm just going to subtitle this in Spanish, literally because at one point you said Gigantes, and that was it. That was the whole reason.
Yeah.
So
but also, in reference to the Mineral Bead, if you were saying you're from Europe, you would use Soy de Europa. However, Intrigued Feline may not be from there originally, and it's just saying that they live there, so they may not be from there.
Yeah. So, giants in North America. So when the first European colonists end up in America, they primarily end up in the eastern seaboard, and especially some of the earliest colonies were in the Northeast, right? So we're talking about, like, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York, Vermont, well, what's now Vermont and New Hampshire, you know, Massachusetts, stuff like that, right? And in a lot of these areas, there are these ancient burial mounds that were created not by the then existing Native American cultures, but by a previous culture that had gone extinct some 1,000-ish years before the Europeans got there. So they were right in thinking that these mounds were not created by the cultures that they encountered, but they decided that instead they had to have been erected by some vastly superior and perhaps European or Asian in extraction culture, because, you know, obviously Native Americans couldn't build big mounds of dirt. I don't actually know why that didn't seem like within their capability, but okay. But one of the things was that some of these mounds of dirt were extremely large, and they weren't all known to be burial mounds. In fact, even today, I don't think that we actually have really good reason to say that they're all burial mounds, but a lot of them were, so it doesn't really matter. But yeah, one of the ideas was perhaps a race of giants had built these very big burial mounds, or mounds in general. And actually, Pinworm, I don't know if the sports ball team, the New York Giants, is connected to giant myths in the American Northeast. I don't know enough about sports ball history. So Vandalia1998 asks, is the title of the video in Klingon above the video avatars? No, that is something entirely different, which I will leave it as an exercise to my Klingon-speaking audience members to translate.
Are there any?
Yes, there are. There's a couple.
Okay.
They're out there.
Venerably, I was right as well. See, Dapper, I told you Porqué is because.
Yeah, no, yeah, you're right. It was the 2 words. I was all confused and whatnot. I'm wrong. Anyway, so let's take a look at this book, which, what's the title of this again?
The Ancient Giants Who Ruled America, the Missing Skeletons in the Great Smithsonian Cover-Up.
Right, because it can't just be that there are mysterious giants. There also has to be a conspiracy theory.
Of course.
Okay, so this is primarily your project, so I'm going to let you tell us where we need to start looking here first.
Okay, so in the preface, which I'm not actually looking at the stream, but yeah, okay, you have it pulled up. Cool.
I have page 29 pulled up because I thought you said that we were going to go from 29 and work backwards or something.
Oh, no, that's where I was starting with my, like, fact-checking citations, but
oh,
I'm on page
I'll just
10. Where
okay, I will go to page 10 then. Here we go. I misunderstood.
That's okay. I was not fully caffeinated.
I'm still not fully caffeinated. I'm still working on that. That's a thing that's currently happening.
Richard Dewhurst is giving us the context for why he wrote this book. And it turns out it's because he's really tall.
That's it.
I wish I were kidding.
I read this whole introduction, and that's the whole one. I was tall, so giants fascinate me. Okay.
Mm-hmm. But what really got me about the preface is that he knew that there were reports of giants being found in, North America, but he tried to look them up and couldn't find any, original citations. And he says, well, in order to finally get to the bottom, I subscribed to some online newspaper services and only could find maybe 1 out of every 4 reports that he had, tried to get a hold of. And he says, out of sheer frustration one day, I put on my old Miami Herald editor's hat and began thinking about how a typical sensationalistic newspaper headline would read. So, automatically, he's constraining his searches to sensationalized headlines. Notice how he has not mentioned looking in scientific journals at least once. He's looking in newspaper accounts, not scientific journals, not peer-reviewed research, not archaeology journals. So,
why would you look at any of the places like that, right? They're in on it.
Yeah. Yeah. His reasoning was if the dates couldn't crack it, a word search could. So his first headline search was for giant skeletons unearthed. No dates, no publications, just pure sensationalism and the hope that the word search would come up with something. And then he gets more headlines when he uses stuff like amazing giants, giant skulls found, secret cave reveals startling discovery, Smithsonian discovers giant skeletons, etc., etc.
All right, so real quick, I just want to say, apparently the stream quality is low, so on my end, everything is checking out as far as my connection speed, as well as my output resolution. So I think there may be a problem on YouTube's end, because I'm seeing it as only offering up to 360 quality, and I do not know why that would be, but I am outputting at 1080, and my output, or my upload rate, is more than sufficient to support that. So the only thing I can think of is there's a problem on YouTube side.
For the viewers, I recommend that you close the side panel for the page display and kind of zoom in on the text a little more.
Yeah, actually,
It might be a little easier to read that way, even though, I don't know,
we're gonna go to this. It's a little bit bigger. Yeah, so I'm not sure what the problem is there. Like I said, everything on my part should be uploading fine. I have green all across the board, so the only thing I can think of is that YouTube is having trouble with putting out a higher frame or a higher resolution than that, and I'm sorry.
But
if you
I do have
oh, sorry.
this PDF available if anyone in the audience, wants a copy to read in your spare time.
I'm gonna make it as
I would never advocate for piracy, of course.
right. So you're gonna send money
Silver
along
Harlow.
to the
Yeah. Silver Harlow says, so I confine my research to the National Enquirer.
That's great.
Basically.
Yeah, so
Okay.
look, I understand, guys, that the quality is bad, but like I said, I currently have no options because currently everything I have is outputting at 1920 by 1080.
I'm watching it in 1080.
So
So maybe it'll fix itself as we go.
yeah, that's the only option I have for you is to say, sorry, YouTube kind of sucks right now.
Yeah. All
So-
glory to the Hypno Toad.
I'll tell you what, here's what I will do. I will make this much, much bigger until perhaps, or even just permanently, in case, maybe we can get some better resolution out there.
And close the side panel for the page view
Yeah.
will also help.
Yeah, no, Nefertiti, sorry, says now it's good for me. Yeah.
Mhm.
It's a YouTube thing, guys. I'm sorry. I literally can't do anything about it. It's impossible. So here we go. Let's get into this craziness.
Okay. So Richard Dewhurst is limiting his selection to things with sensationalized headlines, which, my friend, is not the best foot to start on, but, he was going out there looking for giants, and he says uncovering the real history of America.
Ooh.
So he gets excited because he thinks, this is groundbreaking research and that he has to rethink everything he ever learned in school, and says, well, we've all heard of giants, but we haven't heard that these people were as real as you and me.
Well, were they?
Yeah. He also goes on to say that the most important thing about this book was not that discovering that giants were real, although he will most definitely give you proof of that. What really surprised him was discovering something more shocking, the truth about the early history of America.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So he wrote this book in, I think, 2008? No, 2014. But some of his statistics are from 2008, so it's a little bit outdated. And some of the things that he considers to be like newfangled theories have largely been accepted by the larger scientific community. He claims that the land was populated by very ancient peoples, some of whom were enormous size. And he goes on to quote a lot of 1800s era newspapers and things like that.
What page should I be on?
Fails to give you... this is page 11.
Okay.
I'm in the introduction. So he fails to mention that in the mid to late 1800s, there was a massive competition for people to be the most famous discoverer of everything, especially in anthropology. And he doesn't tell you about the bone wars, for dinosaurs. He doesn't tell you about the development of, the evolutionary hypothesis. He doesn't go into a lot of that. He does mention race science.
Well, so all that stuff is unwelcome
flesh it out.
nuance.
It's unwelcome nuance.
If you guys don't know what unwelcome nuance is about, you should check my community tab sometime. Just
good times.
Wonderful
Unwelcome
stuff.
nuance, yeah. So not only is he searching for sensationalized headlines, he's also ignoring the fact that they were sensationalized for a reason, not just by the newspapers, but by the people who were claiming to make these finds.
Yeah.
So they weren't exactly focused on truth or facts as much as getting famous off of something. So it's going to be dodgy.
Mm-hmm.
So, excuse me. He says when carbon dating became available in the 20th century, earlier estimates of the age of the remains were increased by many magnitudes, with ranges from 5,000 to 14,000 years. I examined the reports of these extraordinary results in Chapter 3 and link some of these early humans with mastodons, which became extinct about 20,000 years ago. So that's a bold goal there.
Okay.
He says, not surprisingly, many finds indicate that the giants were royal beings, as the reports of copper crowns and pearl robes in Chapter 4 make clear.
Wait, how do you make a robe out of pearl? Is it like pearl studded, or is it like actually made of pearl that someone somehow turned into cloth? 'Cause I don't think that's possible.
Press X to doubt.
Yeah. Guys, press X
Yeah.
if you doubt the idea of pearl robes. Unless it means pearl studded, in which case, like, okay, yeah, you can sew a pearl onto a robe, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
That seems fair.
So, scrolling down just a slight bit to the bottom of page 11, he says, at as early as 10,000 BCE, Americans were mining mica for ornaments, as well as mining and refining copper into weapons, jewelry, and exquisite grave goods.
10,000 BCE, huh? I am
gonna need some citations.
Yeah, you know what? We have an animation for that kind of thing. It's yeah, it's citation very much needed.
Ooh, buddy. Yeah, so I will give him partial credit that he used BCE and not just BC.
Okay, yeah, but he's also saying it at 10,000 BC. So, like, yeah, there's not that much credit I can give him for opting to tack on the E. Sorry. It's far more important to me that you actually get the claims right than that you decide exactly how, like, you know, culturally Christian you want to be.
Yeah. He goes on to say, not untruthfully, this land was home to ancient, fully developed, sophisticated cultures capable of fine weaving, mummification, beautiful artwork, and super advanced duck decoys.
That's a weird
but that doesn't mean there were giants everywhere.
This is such a weird flex. Like, hey man, have you seen the ancient Native American duck decoys? It's like, well,
yeah,
no, but what? I've seen a whole lot of really cool like other art. I don't know, duck decoys. Sure, why not?
Yeah, and we know
goes
that people
on about
in Peru mummified, they're dead, so that's not a shock. I know he's focused on North America, but having an advanced civilization doesn't automatically require you to have giants.
Are you sure?
So.
I've never seen a primitive civilization that had giants. So just saying.
Okay.
Just saying.
Going on, he says discrepancies between the amount of copper estimated to have been mined, again, citation needed, and findings of copper in the country hint at worldwide trade in those very ancient times. Worldwide trade 10,000 years ago. Bro.
And even with Rome, never mind that Rome didn't exist 10,000 years ago. I don't... Oh my goodness. And we have 9,000-year-old Caucasian mummies in Nevada. Yeah, sure.
In fact, a long history of pre-Columbian, European, and Asian contact is evidenced all over the continent, as seen in artifacts like the Roman coins and engraved tablets that he examines in Chapter 9, or red-haired, blue-eyed, is that Mandans of North Dakota, or the 9,000-year-old Caucasian mummies of Spirit Cave in Nevada.
Oh my goodness, I hate this next bit. The Florida bog mummies. hundreds of red-haired
You wanna read it?
corpses. Yeah, so he's also saying that Florida bog mummies, hundreds of red-haired corpses so perfectly preserved that their hair and brain tissue can be seen and tested. Okay, here's the thing about that kind of mummy. It tends to make hair red, right? Like, the reason that we see woolly mammoths with red hair isn't because woolly mammoths had red hair. It's because when you preserve things like that, hair tends to get redder. There's various chemical reasons for that, but it's a well-known thing.
Mm-hmm.
Mummies with red hair do not necessarily come from humans with red hair. I think it's because
of the chemicals in the bog soil. It's, I think, similar to like when you use henna to dye your hair, it turns it like a reddish brown color. So
yeah.
Oh no, they all had red hair.
And as Goop23 says, Florida man strikes again. Yes, the 10,000-year-old adventures of Florida man.
It all makes sense now.
Oh, and of course, maybe red-haired Europeans are actually Native Americans, and it's not that Europeans later came to North America with red hair.
Nope. He's raising the potential idea that European red-haired, inhabitants were actually ancestors, or sorry, the red-haired bog mummies were ancestors of the Europeans.
So,
Okay.
There's this thing called genetics. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. It's pretty cool. They take a look at your DNA that's in almost all of your cells, right? And all of your cells start with it, right? It does sound fake, but it's real. I promise. And they test it, and they can tell the actual migration patterns of humans all over the world. And it turns out that people like the Scottish or the Irish are actually pretty closely related to each other, but then they're also pretty closely related to people living in places like modern-day Spain and France. And then together with that, they're pretty closely related to the people living in the rest of Europe, and then that group clusters with people in, like, Western Asia and whatnot. Yeah, whereas people in North America cluster more strongly with people in Siberia.
Weird. It's almost like there was a land bridge or something, but
instead we got red-headed Irish giant zombie mummies or something. I don't know. I don't even know what we're going on about anymore.
Rady Thursday in the chat says, as someone who keeps aquariums, the amount of tannins that would be in the water of a peat bog would stain everything.
Yeah, that checks out. That makes sense to me.
Oh.
Yeah, so long story short there, finding a red-headed bog mummy does not indicate that the human that used to be that person alive was red-headed at all. It's not how that works.
Yeah. Because when we think about people with natural red hair, you're thinking about someone with like strawberry blonde or like bright auburn. You're not thinking about like muddy soil red.
Right.
But I'm sure that doesn't matter. He probably just read a report that said it had red hair and went, oh yeah, that's probably like, Irish people red.
And that report was probably accurate. It just doesn't mean what he thinks it means.
Yeah. He added to this are the startling reports of finds of 7,000-year-old skeletons of a race of blonde-haired giants, along with the remains of a megalithic Stonehenge-era temple on Catalina Island in California.
Is that the site of the Catalina wine mixer?
I live not super far from Catalina, so
you're gonna have to see the temple.
The next time when I'm gonna go get on a ferry, and I'm gonna go to Catalina. I'm gonna see if I can find these Stonehenge era temples.
I want to see that. Also, Vandalia 1998 for $5 says, DNA, is that newfangled thing that tells us we are a monkey? Yes, it is that newfangled thing that tells us that we are a monkey. Well, it's another thing that is newfangled that also tells us that humans are monkey. There were other things before that. You don't need DNA to know that a human is a monkey, but it helps.
I'm telling you, wasn't it that photo of a bonobo that you showed me? And I was like, that's a person. Yeah.
There's when people are sort of like, I don't know if humans are apes. There's one particular picture of a bonobo that I like to share because it just looks like a woman, like
with
a human woman.
Head.
Yeah, with a weird tiny head and a lot of hair, and that's just what it is.
Mm-hmm.
It just looks like a human woman with a weird tiny head and a lot of hair.
Yep.
So.
And extremely engorged genital areas.
Well, that's a Panin thing. They get a lot of there's things about like fertility cycles involved there.
All right, so skipping down to the next paragraph, he says that, he's going to do true historical inquiry. Apologies,
By
my
checking
tongue tied today for
newspapers.
some reason. Unclouded by prejudice will eventually tell us the answer. No, scientific inquiry will tell you the answer, not just looking through newspapers.
Ooh, Smitty makes a good point. He says, "Is DNA still fangled? Or sorry, still newfangled? Discovered in the 60s and 70s. I would think it's mesofangled. Yeah, that seems reasonable. We could call it mesofangled.
It's a liminal space.
Ooh, actually, this is super off topic, but if you guys don't know about the little like online horror series about the Backrooms that dropped with a really good found footage, the Backrooms.
So good.
Okay, well, more of it is in production, and you know how I know?
Mm-hmm.
It's being rendered on my render farm, and I rendered a few frames of more the Backroom stuff, so I get a little bit of extra frames of that stuff, and I was like, oh, that's the Backrooms. More of it's happening.
Awesome.
So yeah, that's happening.
I'm very excited. Yeah, the Backrooms is horrifying, but I love it. Okay, so Richard Dewhurst goes on to say, but what we have instead is a perfect storm of wrong-headed thinking in order to protect current scientific theory, and central to the promotion of wrong-headed thinking has been the Smithsonian Institution.
Dum dum dum. I need like a dramatic music sting in my actual audio library here.
Yeah, you do. So you're gonna find out what the wrong-headed thinking is here shortly.
Is it just that we need actual provenance?
The Smithsonian of, well, he goes on to accuse the Smithsonian of like covering a bunch of shit up because it doesn't match their, scientific paradigm, which is again not how science works.
No.
And conspiracies require more work to be true than they do to like not be true. So
also, I want to add that when the Smithsonian was first founded, the idea of like weird European-y giant North Americans was actually not outside the paradigm. That was actually something that people were pretty like that was like pretty reasonable for most people's expectations.
So he says something happened after the promising beginning of the Smithsonian. What my research, and I use that term very loosely,
there aren't enough scare quotes around research.
Has revealed is that the Smithsonian has been at the center of a vast cover-up of America's true history since the 1880s.
My goodness. That's this is startling
and
news.
Here, he goes off on a Hovind-like tangent.
Of course
this is the best way I can describe it.
But I'll say
the Smithsonian was originally founded in in fact, I'll read it like Hovind.
Okay.
The Smithsonian was originally founded in 1829 with a $500,000 grant from the British mineralogist. Mineralogist, I added a syllable.
Yeah.
James Smithson, who never visited the United States, died without heirs and was buried in Genoa, Italy. The sign of the Smithsonian's utter disregard for history is that Smithson's body was reburied at the Smithsonian Castle in the 20th century in a sarcophagus that lists his age as 75, when it was common knowledge that he was closer to 65 when he died.
Okay.
How is that relevant?
Someone got an epitaph wrong. Therefore, giants in North America, I guess.
Take a drink.
Seriously. After the Civil War, the Smithsonian began to adopt a policy of excluding any evidence of direct foreign influence in the Americas prior to Columbus. Did they, or was there just not any? And actually, not even that there wasn't any, because now we know that there were, in fact, some like Norse trips to like parts of Canada. So like not actually true. Now, they were
so
short-lived.
I do apologize to the side chat because they didn't want to have to hear Kent Hovind again. But Go 3 does have my back. To be fair, Hovind probably would have also mispronounced mineralogist.
That's true.
Add an extra syllable there. That is so weird.
So, by the way, I've talked to more than one person who's known Kent, and there's a pretty good consensus that he's probably functionally illiterate.
I wish I could turn on my camera and show you my shocked face.
I mean, you can, but I don't blame you for not doing so.
Yeah, I've got just crazy bedhead, and I'm super tired and don't look my best, so. That's not happening today, folks. Okay. So some have argued that the lack of, American influence by outsiders was the result of post-Civil War governments trying to downplay regional conflicts, which, okay, but the conflicts at that time were racially biased as to whether humans were property or not. And not, hey, were the Native Americans being influenced by global mica mining and copper trading?
Yeah, I'm sure that North American copper was making its way right into the Middle East all the time. Mm-hmm. Which also, I want to point out, a lot of the same kind of pseudo-archaeology, weird, kind of racist anthropology stuff also happens in Mormon circles, where they really, really, really want there to be pre-Columbian contact between, North Africa and, Western Asia and the Americas. Oh, good.
Yeah. So others have pointed to the expansionist policies incorporated in the doctrine of manifest destiny and the desire to obscure the origin of the tribes being displaced and annihilated by westward expansion. Still others have alleged that it was a direct religious policy adapted to counter the growing problem with Mormonism.
Ah, see, there you go. All right. First, I don't think it was adopted. I don't think there was a policy. I don't have a citation for that policy. I want the citation, everybody, but we're not going to get one. But yeah, the thing is,
gonna get it.
For most of the 1800s, unless you were out west where the Mormons were, people back east didn't really care that much. It was just yeah, the Mormons are all being weird and setting up their own kingdom in land that the United States doesn't really currently claim, so whatever. Just whatever. And very few people were taking their archaeological claims seriously because, again, they had no positive evidence. Yeah. Still don't.
Well, the next paragraph, he mentions John Wesley Powell. And John Wesley Powell was indeed associated with, the U.S. Geological Survey and the Smithsonian Institution, but he was a geologist.
Okay.
Really. He wasn't into anthropology. That wasn't his big, trade. He did do more things outside of geology. He did what could very, very loosely be called ethnographic work on Native Americans. But it's only because he wanted to, quote, civilize them. Because
obviously.
This is literally right in the middle of Western expansion and how, the white man's superior and they have to civilize the, savages and blah, blah, blah. So he had a hand in government decisions regarding Native Americans. And his whole mindset of them being inferior led to, really horrific policies. So.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he was not a great role model, even though his geology work is very sound and is considered very, fundamental to, modern geology.
You can be a really, really awful human being and still do rigorous science, as it turns out.
Yeah. But again, it's geology. His geology work is really good, but his not geology work is questionable. So, yeah, I think it's fair that, Richard Dewhurst kind of dunks on Wesley Powell a little bit, but it doesn't mean that because he was racist that giants.
Right. In fact, to a large extent, the origin of giant stories in North America was because of racist Europeans.
Yeah. So he goes on to talk about, his tenure at the Smithsonian and his association with, Native American fairs and so forth. He says the title of Powell's first report to the Secretary of the Smithsonian in 1879 says, quote, on limitations to the use of some anthropologic data, end quote, is revealing and shows the ulterior policy at work within the nascent Smithsonian institution. So he's making the claim that because Powell was racist and he worked at the Smithsonian, that every single thing that the Smithsonian did from that time on was going to definitely be racist.
Yeah.
And then he quotes from, Powell's work. There's a couple of places I highlighted. Ooh, But yes, we know Powell wasn't the greatest dude. However, this particular block of text that Dewhurst puts in the book, if you read it as a repudiation of Mormonism, it's way easier to get the context than just, oh, savage natives. He says, in the monuments of antiquity found throughout North America, you find village sites, graves, mounds, ruins, and scattered works of art. The origin and development of art in savage and barbaric life may be satisfactorily studied. Incidentally, too, hints of customs may be discovered, but outside of this, the discoveries made have often been illegitimately used, especially for the purpose of connecting the tribes of North America with peoples of so-called races of antiquity in other portions of the world, aka Israel.
Yeah.
Freaking Mormons. A brief review of some conclusions that must be accepted in the present status of science will exhibit the futility of these attempts. It may be said that in the Pueblos discovered in the southwestern portion of the U.S. and further south through Mexico and perhaps into Central America, tribes are known having a culture quite as far advanced as any exhibited in the discovered ruins. In this respect, then, there is no need to search for extraliminal origin through lost tribes for any art there exhibited. And then he says it again, there is therefore no reason for us to search for extraliminal origin through lost tribes for the arts discovered in the mountains of North America.
Yeah.
So it's not just him going, oh, they were primitive, so therefore, less than white people. He's saying their culture fit with their, entire way of life. It doesn't require them to be lost tribes of Israel.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things is it's like there's nothing about ancient North American archaeology that requires like contact with far-flung cultures, and even less it indicates that it would have happened, right? Like, for one thing, okay, so let's say Native Americans in North America are coming into contact with like Rome in like the 2nd century BCE or something. Why did none of them pick up on the idea of the alphabet? It's really handy. Like, we know that Native American groups, when they did encounter writing, a whole bunch of them independently found ways to use it to transcribe their own languages because it was handy. How come none of them figured this out? Like, they're not dumb.
Also, the Mayans had their own writing system well in hand before Columbus ever got here.
Yeah, and why was it an independent thing, right? So one of the interesting things is, like, if you look at the independent origin of writing, it's happened very few times. So it happened in Egypt, it happened in China, it happened in Mesopotamia, and it happened in Mesoamerica, and it probably happened on Easter Island. That's 5 times in the entire history of humanity where writing was created de novo. But the number of times it was transmitted from one culture to another is just incalculable. It happened all over the place all the time. It basically took almost no time at all for between a culture encountering a writing system that could be reasonably easily adapted to their own language to then getting a writing system that was reasonably well adapted to their language. It's extremely fast because basically once you understand the concept, you're like, oh, this is one of the handiest things in the world.
Yeah. And, in terms of Mesoamerica, the Mayans were super, advanced in terms of their writing style, which we literally only decoded in the last 50 years or so. And that was kind of a lucky shot, honestly. But the Aztecs were known for having volumes of writings, and the Spanish, came in and took some of their stuff and, re-recorded it in their own manuscripts, but they also burned a truckload of stuff because they're like, oh no, it's evil, pagan stuff. We can't have this. So there is so much history that's been lost by various cultures, encountering each other and deciding, oh, this is not okay. Let's get rid of it and replace it with ours.
Yeah.
Dude.
Oh, and we have one of the mounds here on screen, which is fun.
Yes, we do. The Kincaid site.
Yeah. So one of the reasons that these things were thought to be associated with giants is the fact that to get the full impression of it in one go with your own eyes, you do need to be pretty far above it or to have mapped it out. But the thing is, even without writing, you can draw a map. Like, that's actually not that complicated. And you can make plans and things like that by, scratching on rocks or drawing in dirt or all sorts of things. So it doesn't actually take writing or anything like that to make these things. And also, the fact that they are not easily viewed except from above, well, a lot of cultures, Native American and otherwise,
Harry
believe... Oh, goodness. Carrie Bronson for $5. No, you don't you get it? The Vimana anti-grav mountaintop hopper scrambles writing a la Babel when you use
Babel.
it. Babel, you know? You complain, you know what, I'm gonna, whatever. A la Babel when you use it to travel over oceans, ancient aliens. Yes. So this is also connected to the whole ancient aliens thing, because giants is another explanation, because obviously native cultures couldn't have made art that was on a large scale without giants or aliens or something. I don't know.
You know what is also hysterically funny to me is that, you know, when they're talking about something like the Nazca lines, they go, oh, you can't see these unless you're in the air. There's no way they could have drawn this. And I'm like, how do you think that humanity mapped entire portions of the globe without having airplanes or satellites?
Yeah, I mean, people know how to triangulate. People know how to draw scale maps. It's a thing.
It's almost like we have like spatial thinking or something.
So the Smitty asked a question about the Inca and other Andeans that had knotted strings. These are called quipu. And it's not clear. Like no one knows how to interpret them completely, but it does seem like they were probably. Oh,
yeah, they do.
They do. Are you sure?
Yeah. I'm
gonna want a citation.
Graduate students actually figured this out. The quipu were there to keep track of like census data.
Okay.
And the system of knotting, oh, God, it's so cool. I'll have to show you this after the stream is over. The position of the knots in the string vertically indicate certain denominations. So just, I'm going to make up a scale. Let's say you have a top row of knots that go across the quipu. That top row represents like fives. The next row down would be tens. The next is hundreds. The next one's thousands. So you can look at how many knots are in that section and go, oh, that's 5,322. And that's the number that it's meant to represent on that string. So there's actually been really, really good work done on the quipu and how they, you know, were tracking data like that. It's cool as hell.
Well, there you go. I'm not up to date on my quipu research, and I am still going to want that citation, but
okay.
There you go.
Yeah, it's hella cool. I learned about this like 2 years ago, I think.
Well, good job, graduate students.
Yeah, I know, right?
All right. Let's see what else we get here.
Right. I'm pulling up your citations, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
You want to read that?
So, foremost among the wrong-headed theories Powell championed is evolution. Guys, did you have anti-evolution on your weird conspiracy bingo card? Because if you did, you can check off that box right there. We are shown charts of man becoming bipedal and each, quote, new man being bigger and smarter than the last. I wonder if that's because we see an increase in size of hominins throughout geological time. I wonder if that's why we see these charts of, quote, man becoming bigger. Weird. This is in direct contradiction to the charts we use for every other animal we study. What? No, it's not. You ever seen horses? They get way bigger. In fact, there was at one point was the idea that there was an actual relationship between the length of time a group of organisms had been around and their average size, such that as the older a group was, the bigger they got. That was an actual idea that was put forth in evolutionary biology. Turns out that doesn't really work. But, like, it was such a strong trend in so many organisms that it was actually proposed as, like, a guideline. Anyway.
There's a couple things in the chat I want to address. Yes, there are mountains that are somewhat near the Nazca lines, but it's not necessarily close enough for you to see all of the designs. The mountains aren't quite that high. But also, the comment from Mr. K says pre-Columbian Americans look like Africans. They did not look like Africans. They looked like pre-Columbian Americans. The broad flat nose is still a trait that is commonly found among Central Americans to this day in indigenous tribes. So there's like all these conspiracy theories that like, oh yeah, Africans totally populated, you know, Central America and that's being hidden. Like, no, they're literally not related. Stop.
Well,
and
they are related, just very
comment,
distantly.
Very distantly. And Silver Harlow is talking to us and says, start to say Babylon, but stop before the on sound. The tower was named after the city. Yes, I know. That's why I got onto Dapper, because in literally every like rendering, it's Babel. So I got onto him the other day because they kept going between Babel and Babel, and I was like, ah.
I say it how I want. Anyway, here's the next line, which is amazing. We have only to look at a bird and be told that it was once a dinosaur to know how false this paradigm of man's growth is. The average size of one group decreased over time. Therefore, no other group can increase over time. This is the actual take we're going for.
Look at the evolution. The record says they got smaller, not bigger. Like, this is literally Kent Hovind level of parroting. Oh, evolution means bigger, stronger, faster, smarter. Like,
chickens are smaller than T-Rex. Evolution wrecked. F's in the chat for evolution, boys. Just... what is even happening anymore? Oh. However, with all the modern edifices of education built on the theory of evolution and growing stature of humanity, yeah, because it's a pillar, it's a foundational aspect of evolution that humans got bigger. It's not just what we just happened to find. People were religiously devoted to the idea that humans were getting bigger over time. Oh my goodness.
We can't very well have the Smithsonian running around telling people that we've degenerated from an ancient race of giants who ruled America now, can we?
Well, first off, I don't think this we applies how this guy thinks it is. Because unless he's Native American, which I'm suspecting he's not.
I no.
Then who's the we? But like...
Good question.
The second theory, current time, was called uniform gradual history. Oh, okay. Yeah, huge spans of time with no catastrophes. I don't know anyone who thinks that. The opposite of this theory is the more modern school of thought called catastrophism. I'm not sure I'd call it modern, but okay, based on the provable fact. He's talking like a flat earther now. Based on the provable fact that disasters happen frequently and often. I mean, kinda, yeah. Depends on your definitions of frequently and often. The record here in the Americas speaks clearly on the subject. It relates not only to the disappearance of the Western island civilizations dating back to before 5000 BCE. Inland. Oh, sorry, inland. I can't read. Yeah. Which were wiped out by volcano. Yeah, I'm gonna need
a sudden cessation of the copper trade around 1500 BC, dude.
Come on, dude. Like, none of this is a real thing.
Is he thinking about like the Bronze Age collapse and getting that mixed up with his like pseudoscientific theory of like worldwide mica, mines and copper trading 10,000 years ago? Like,
also, I love this. I do not think it a coincidence that in 1500 BCE the volcano wiped out the Cretan Empire. The Exodus in Egypt factors Egypt. Okay, so hold up. So first of all, let's be clear. There's literally no physical evidence of an exodus of a large number of Hebrews from Egypt in a way that corresponds very well to the basic literal level reading of Exodus, right? Like,
and I will have to concur, even though it hurts my soul to say that, because as much as I want it to be actual literal true history, we just don't have the evidence. And using the excuse, well, the Egyptians got embarrassed so bad they erased it from their history. You can't.
And they erased all archaeological evidence.
Silence. Yeah. You can't use lack of evidence as evidence. That's just really not how it works.
So we don't really have a good reason to think that there was a mass exodus of people from Egypt who were previously enslaved in Egypt. Like, that's just not a thing that we can find any actual like historical or archaeological evidence of outside of Exodus itself, which, given that the entire Torah is basically a polemical work against the polytheistic Babylonians, there's good reason to think that maybe there was some motivation in terms of exaggerating stories like this.
But don't you know that, the Israelites built the pyramids?
Gosh. No, they really didn't. They really didn't. Anyway,
as well as... The number of people I've had, say that to me with straight face, I'm just...
Oh my goodness. No. So first, I have no idea even if the Exodus were definitely a real thing, what does it have to do with the volcanoes that helped ruin, who's going with the Cretan Empire, although we normally call it Minoan, but,
Yeah.
Whatever.
Again, like I said, I don't think this guy's really up to date on current anthropology and stuff like that.
Right, but also volcanoes in the Mediterranean don't have any obvious connection to volcanoes in North America, right? Like, just recently, as you guys all know, there was a really big eruption in Tonga. And you know what that didn't also cause? All the other volcanoes in the world to erupt. Like, did Mount Fuji erupt? No. Did Mount St. Helens erupt? No. Did any other major eruptions happen as a result of it? No.
Well, the closest that you're going to get, and he, of course, does not even think to mention this, because I bet he doesn't even know about it, are the volcanic eruptions in the 1800s. Like, wasn't it Krakatoa and, what's the other one that caused the summer without a winter? Or the year without a summer?
Oh, I'm trying to remember what that one was.
Crap. It's on the tip of my tongue. But yeah, those we have actual evidence for. Not just the fact that there's a gigantic hole in the ground for where the volcano went kabloom, but also the fact that we found evidence of the fallout for hundreds and hundreds of miles.
Right.
They heard the sound blast or whatever thousands of miles away, and it impacted weather patterns for like the next 3 years or something. So if we had volcanoes destroying advanced civilizations like in Santorini, we would have found the evidence by now.
Yeah, exactly. And also, shutting down the copper trade in America for almost 2,000 years, based on what? Like, look, there was some metalworking going on in the Americas, right? It's not true.
Thank you, Don Giovanni.
It's not true that the Native Americans just didn't work metal at all. However, they did a lot less of it. A lot less. And so, like, and I don't know of any reason to think that the copper trade in America just went away for 2,000 years as a result of a volcano in the Mediterranean that also caused, like, none of this makes any sense.
Yeah.
Ooh.
The third major contributing factor to the extant historical myopia is the land bridge theory. I cannot. Literally thinks the land bridge hypothesis is fake. Like,
okay, so why,
Richard, please?
Why do we think that there was a land bridge between Siberia and Alaska? Well, we
Can I
know.
make a guess?
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
I'm gonna guess it's because of cultural similarities, genetic similarities, and migration patterns.
Oh, it's more than that. Those are all parts of it, but here's another part. We know that at the last glacial maximum, there was a certain volume of ice sitting on top of the continents because we can measure where the ice was as a result of things like looking at glacial tills. We also know how much that volume of water sitting on land would lower the oceans. And the height of the dirt under there, right? The seabed that's currently in the Bering Strait is high enough to have been exposed during the last glacial maximum. So you put all those things together. We know there was a land bridge because there physically had to have been one. We know of cultural and genetic similarities between the people of Siberia and the peoples of North America. We know that we have archaeological and, like, not quite paleontological, but still, like, very ancient prehistory Stone Age stuff, where we see humans spreading from the northwest of North America down into the rest of North America, then down into South America. Right? Like, all of these lines lead to the same idea. The majority of human colonization, originally, of the first humans to ever arrive in the Americas, was done over the Bering Land Bridge from Siberia into Alaska. And then spreading south from there.
Quick break at any
Absolutely,
point?
we can take a quick break. You know what? I'm going to refill my
Let's
coffee.
do that. Yeah, I need some more coffee.
All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break and be back with fresh caffeine, because this is a caffeine show, not an alcohol show. Okay, we are back from that quick little break. I have fresh coffee. You got anything?
I got Cheetos.
Cheetos. All right. Well, I have
Yeah.
fresh coffee, but for some reason I put the coffee in for the normal time that I use it to heat it up because, the pot of coffee is cold now because it's from earlier this morning. But then it just boiled over, so I had to clean up
Oops.
a whole big puddle of coffee in the microwave, and I still don't know why it did that because it doesn't normally, so I'm just having really bad luck today. Anyway, let's continue on with crazy conspiracy theories about giants.
So, Richard Dewhurst finds the land bridge theory to be stupid.
For reasons.
And he goes on to say, the man who came up with this absurd and unprovable theory is none other than Dr. Aleš Hrdlicka, the first curator.
Is that a Georgian name or something, or is that Hungarian or something? What are you getting from this?
It is Hrdlicka, sorry. He's Czech. Well,
Czech.
was
Okay.
Czech. Yeah.
Yeah, there's not that many languages that will let an R stand as like the core of a syllable.
Yeah, Hrdlicka. So, okay. He's dunking on Dr. Aleš Hrdlicka, sorry. Gotta keep missing that. The first curator of physical anthropology in the U.S. National Museum, which is now the Smithsonian. No boats for him. They walked, even though we know they would have had to walk around or through extensive glaciers still blocking Canada.
Okay. People walk across glaciers. It's a thing that still happens.
Yeah. Were they not capable of slowly sailing from one island to another, as we know the Polynesians and Australians did for 40,000 years?
Okay, so actually that's a good question, right? So we do know that for a very long, and actually 40,000 is not that crazy of an estimate, there were humans who were island hopping throughout Polynesia, right? That's a real thing. So why didn't Polynesians, or just broadly speaking Austronesians, because that's kind of the broader group that we're talking about.
Vandelli 1998 had a super chat.
Oh, I'm sorry. We must have been that must have been during the break, and I missed it. 1 second. Let me pull that up. Oh,
and while you pull that up, hello, Yaroslav Kurdik from Ukraine. Hello.
Hello. Let's see. Vanelli 1998 for $5 says, and it's not just the humans we know. Some animals went the other direction on the land bridge. Yeah, actually, that's also true. There's a reason that like elk are the same species in Siberia and in North America, and it's not because they island hopped on boats. I promise that's not what happened. But anyway. There actually is some evidence to say that some Austronesian peoples actually did make it to like Central or Western South America. And that's because in those areas, we actually do find some genetic markers that actually tie some of the people there to possibly Austronesian populations. So it did happen. It just was not the primary way that the lands of the Americas were peopled. And it happened after the land bridge. So it's not so much that they couldn't have, it's that they evidently didn't, because we have the genetics, we have the archaeology, we have the geology, all of it lines up with the Bering Land Bridge hypothesis. The thing is, like, I don't know of any anthropologist who would have, like, a complaint about island hopping through the Pacific to get to the Americas. It's just that's not what the evidence shows, right? It's not like there's this dogmatic religious conviction that, no, it has to be the Bering Land Bridge. It's just that's what it seems to be.
I need to work on my Cyrillic reading skills off the cuff.
Oh, I'm not great at it.
Yaroslav's surname, so sorry. Okay. And as John Giovanni notes, horses evolved on the North American plains, but the native population died out while the Eurasian population survived to be domesticated and then brought right back.
That's true. That part is true.
So, back to the book. Dewhurst says, the land bridge theory is absurd, but the Smithsonian told us to believe it, and we did. Guy went to the Kenthoven School of Science's dogma.
By the way, Starrunner points out the recent, perhaps up to 22,000-year-old human footprints I am aware of that find. However, right now, I am waiting to see how that like shakes out in terms of. It's still currently a controversial thing, and I'm not competent in the paleoanthropology to the point where I'm going to be comfortable saying that I think that we can draw these conclusions and whatnot from it. So I think until there's been further scrutiny and further analysis of how that fits into ideas about the general peopling of the Americas, then I'm going to be circumspect about talking about that particular find, because it's far less well established than a lot of the other stuff that we can talk about here. So I am aware of it, but yeah, it's still sort of there's a lot of questions surrounding it. Not that I think it's fake or anything.
Yeah, when academics get caught in such a perfect storm of wrong theories, they have such a very. God, I'm sorry.
That's an amazing sentence. A perfect storm. What's the copyright on this? When was this written?
2014.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
It reads like it's straight out of 1990.
I know. They have a very hard time wriggling out of it. Reputations and careers are at stake. Books have been written and published, and promotions garnered on the weight of their verity. So the fix was in from the beginning, so to speak.
You gotta talk like a gangster whenever you're trying to overturn the predominant anthropological paradigm for an entire 2 continents.
This is a thing that I've noticed with like young Earth creationists and people who are anti-evolution and things like that. They expect science to emerge from the womb, fully formed, like Athena springing from the head of Zeus. Like, that's not how science works. It's a process.
Yeah.
It is a process. There are things that we publish, and then 10 years later, we're like, oh shit, we were really wrong. I mean, me and Dapper were actually watching a video about geocentrism the other day. And who was it? Copernicus spent volumes on math calculations for a geocentric Earth, and guess what? That was wrong.
Yeah. Well, it was Aristotle. They did the volumes. Copernicus.
Okay.
Copernicus was a heliocentrism.
Oh, right. That's right.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can publish many volumes of math calculations and still be wrong.
It's true. Yeah. If you don't have the math, there's no reason to take you seriously, but just because you do, that's still not enough to make you right. It helps, though. Oh, we get into the question of racism. Goodness, this is going to be great. The thorny question of racism and manifest destiny, which recorded reads like this: America is inhabited by a race of inferior people whom civilized man has a God-given right to exterminate. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and say, no, even Manifest Destiny, actually, the ideology didn't say that the white man was supposed to exterminate Native Americans. The idea was supposed to be that the, European descended Americans had a moral obligation to uplift the poor, savage Native American and bring him up as high as he could reasonably go into civilized life. Which you can't do if you exterminate them.
Christian, God-fearing,
Right. So it was certainly racist in the sense that, like, most Europeans didn't think that Native Americans, even during this Manifest Destiny, could maintain, like, European-style levels of civilization and learning and whatnot. But they thought that they could, help them up a little bit. But that is contradictory to extermination. Manifest Destiny was not an exterminationist proposal. It just wasn't.
There are people who took it to that extreme, but it wasn't inherently that way. It was like, oh, we're so advanced and enlightened, we have to enlighten everyone else.
Yeah. One has only to read... oh, sorry.
I was going to say Silver Harlow is correct in the chat, saying, because creationists start with their conclusion and work backwards towards the premise, they think scientists must work the same way.
Yeah, that's actually true. There's a lot of projection of the tendencies of anti-science people onto science. So, for instance, the same thing happens when creationists try to character assassinate Darwin, where it's just like, first, they lie about him, so that doesn't help. But even if they were right, that Darwin was, a worst kind of racist, sexist, plagiarist, it's like, okay. It literally doesn't matter.
Yaroslav, can you cite the passage in the Bible that claims Adam was a giant, please?
I am unaware of any passage in the Bible indicating that. But hey,
Yeah, I know. I'm like, wait.
look, we have no problem looking things up in the Bible on this show. We do it all the time. But so let's see. Many of these pictographs are simply pictures, rude etchings, or paintings delineating natural objects, especially animals, and illustrate simply the beginning of pictorial art. I mean, that's true for ancient cave art, generally speaking. Oh, okay, this is Powell's report. So this is our author here is citing this unfavorably. We know others were intended to commemorate events or to represent other ideas entertained by their authors, but to a large extent they were simply mnemonic, not conveying ideas of themselves. I'm less confident about that, but okay. But designed more thoroughly to retain in memory certain events or thoughts by persons who were already cognizant of the same through current hearsay or tradition. My goodness, that's quite a sentence. Once the memory of the thought had to be reserved and was passed on for the minds of men, the record is powerless to restore its own subject matter to the understanding. So that is kind of getting into the difference between actual writing systems and just using pictures to help you remember things. So for instance, let's say that you put up a mural to commemorate that time that, like, Uncle Bob shot that deer that had, like, it was a 14-point buck. And that's really great. So you put up a picture of Uncle Bob with a 14-point buck in your room that you painted to commemorate the occasion. Okay. But then Uncle Bob dies, and you die, and, now it's like your great-grandkids, and now there's just a picture of a guy with a deer. It doesn't mean anything anymore. Whereas if you wrote, on this day, Uncle Bob killed the buck with the 14 points at this place, then you get to remember that. So let's see. Hence, we'll be seeing that it is illegitimate to use any pictographic matter to date anterior to the discovery of the continent by Columbus for historic purposes. So this is less true now than it was in the past, because now we have ways to date actual drawings. We can do things like check the patinal thickness in other areas versus on the actual pictograph and whatnot, but it's still actually pretty hard to date pictographs. So that is kind of still the case. And of course, our author says that when you step back for a moment from the pseudoscientific double talk, what he is saying is this. These are essentially dumb savages with the minds of... No, these are essentially dumb savages with the minds of children. No, that's not what any of this means.
That's not what he said.
None of that implies any of the idea that these are dumb savages with the minds of children. It's just limits inherent in pictograms, and also the fact that some of them are so ancient that, yeah, some of them are some of the earliest pictograms known from humans, right? They're not as old as the ones in France, but humans got to France first. So...
And the thing is like, you can only communicate so much information through a pictogram.
Mm-hmm.
So, you can tell a story, sort of, but you're not going to get all the fine details unless you have, like, a more detailed writing system. You can't just use pictographs unless you end up going, like, the way of hieroglyphics.
So Yaroslav asks if Trex feathered or not. First, Trex isn't a thing. There's capital T period space small r small e small x T-Rex.
Well, English is probably a second language. I'll give him a break.
Well, that thing is, though, that because of how scientific nomenclature works, that actually is the case in all languages. You always have to write it that way. Even if you're using a language that doesn't use the Latin alphabet, you need to switch to it for the binomial. So take that.
Okay.
Anyway.
Mr. Babel.
The answer is probably not, but there's no way to actually know for sure. I'm leaning towards no for T-Rex having feathers. The fact is that we have skin impressions from small portions of the body, and every place that we have skin impressions from, they have reticulate scales and no hint of feathering. So, is it possible that they had feathers just in the places we haven't been able to check? Yeah, but, it's more likely that they just didn't.
Certainly be a find.
Right, it's more likely that they just didn't. Now, to be fair, all the places that we could have checked are places that if an animal has a mixture of reticulate scales or smooth skin and feathers, those would be the places where you'd be most likely to find the scales or smooth skin. Okay, but still, most animals that have either smooth skin or scales there still have it all over the place, and most animals that have feathers have them on those places too. So, yeah. What about T-Rex chicks? There's a better question, Smitty. The answer is much, much more likely. One of the reasons why T-Rex probably didn't have feathers is that it probably could rely on gigantothermy to keep its body temperature up, which is basically when you're really, really big, you generate more heat. But T-Rex chicks probably didn't have that option. So, but anyway, we're going to get back to the Los Gigantes.
So, it is bad enough that these biased and unsupported claims were the policy of the Smithsonian in the 19th century, but to make matters worse, Charles Doolittle Walcott, secretary of the Smithsonian from Who Cares years, made the Powell Doctrine the official dogma of the museum for the entire 20th century as well. In fact, the Powell Doctrine is still the official policy of the Smithsonian at the time of writing, despite the fact that some scholars associated with the museum are finally starting to speak out in support of evidence of early European settlement of the Americas. Those are like completely different topics, my man.
Yeah. Also,
first of all, the Powell Doctrine is not what Dewhurst is saying it is. Second of all, the Smithsonian's policies aren't, well, we think, all these people were childish primitives. Third of all, European settlement of the Americas is geographically limited to like Newfoundland area. It is not inland United States.
Mm-mm. Yeah, no. And also, just
you
the fact...
might, maybe, on a stretch, get somebody coming down near some of the Great Lakes states. But even those are highly suspect.
It's also not the case that the Smithsonian is just in charge of anthropology. Like, that's not how that works. You can actually do anthropological digs and archaeology in the United States and have nothing to do with the Smithsonian at all. And they can't just stop you. Like, they're not like the Gestapo of United States archaeology.
But, if you're creationist, everything comes from like a religious authority. So, they're like the Vatican of anthropology.
That's true. Yeah, I hear that, they just hold these councils of anthropology, and then the president or whatever of the Smithsonian just declares ex cathedra that Native Americans didn't come from Europe. That's just how it goes, guys. Sorry. Ooh, and out of context finds. So are we going to start getting into the actual, like, weird pseudo-archaeology nonsense stuff?
We are almost to the part where he's quoting news articles, or news, quote-unquote, articles.
Okay, so
Okay, so the great crime and tragedy of this policy is hard to compute. One glaring result has been the suppression of hundreds of out-of-context finds, all submitted to the museum in naive ignorance of the museum's official policy of suppression of alternative perspectives. Okay, Richard, let's talk. Their official position is not, well, we're going to suppress alternative perspectives because those alternative perspectives are not scientific.
Right, it's... The alternative perspectives have no evidence, therefore we don't talk about them until they do. There's a difference.
You're suppressing me.
Yeah. How dare you not believe the things I say with literally no reason to say them? All right, want to go on to chapter 1, findings on ancient American giants.
Also, figure 1-6. Or I think, yeah,
it's Jack and the Beanstalk.
Just to hammer home the scientific rigor of this particular book, we're getting an illustration from Jack and the Beanstalk. So
yeah, which is always fun. How big were they?
Side chat is discussing whether Lucifer is the devil or something else, and literally it's that particular word's referring to Venus, but okay. All right, what makes us call a person a giant? And then he lists some people who are giants. Okay, the tallest person in history was Robert Pershing Wadlow. 8 feet 11 inches and weighed 490 pounds at the time of his death. Dapper, throwing it to you.
Okay, so Robert Wadlow was, in fact, as far as I know, the tallest confirmed human to have ever existed. There's always the possibility there was someone taller in the past that we don't know about, but... one of the important things is that Robert Wadlow died at age 22. And there's a reason for this. Wadlow couldn't walk on his own. he required leg braces when walking, and he also had essentially no feeling in his feet because he had such big circulation problems. He didn't use a wheelchair, but he probably should have. In fact, he actually ended up dying because one of his leg braces started chafing against his ankle, and it got infected, and I believe he ended up septic, although it's hard to say exactly because, I mean, you know, died in 1940. They didn't have great medical diagnoses. But also, he had an enlarged heart. There was a whole lot of problems. And actually, no, I just double-checked it. It did become septic, and they attempted to treat him with a blood transfusion and surgery, but his condition worsened. And here's the other thing. We have other people with quote-unquote gigantism. Like we have Andre the Giant, who died of heart problems relating to his enormous heart. Human beings simply cannot get all that big without having significant change to their physiology. There's a kind of adaptation that some animals have called graviportal. It just means that you can get around while being really big. It requires specialized anatomy that humans simply don't have. You cannot isometrically scale a human up to be much bigger than about 7 feet without it starting to cause problems. And Robert Wadlow was just short of 9 feet, or 3 meters, right? This was a man who was like, what is that, like 2.7 meters? I'm going to check. And we'll just turn that off into centimeters. So, oh, sorry. Yeah, so that's 2.7178. So, yeah, when I said 2.75, that was pretty close. I'm not that bad at going in my head between feet and meters. So, yeah, we're talking, like, not that far shy of 3 meters tall. Humans cannot get that big and be healthy. So now that we have established that, yeah, Robert Wadlow was not exactly a picture of good health, and that this is not a sustainable way to have a population, let's continue on. 8 feet 11 inches, weighed 490 pounds.
Also, this is Wadlow with, at the time, the most modern medicine and treatments available, and leg braces, and the ability to do blood transfusions,
which
and
were not available,
sepsis and things like that. Those things, in the form, at least that we know them, were not available several thousand years ago.
But you're forgetting that ancient giants had big brains. So they invented leg braces in the past. Ancient leg braces made of copper that they traded with Egypt. Sorry. I'm sorry.
To say that there's an entire race of giants that were at least as tall as this, if not taller, and they survived long enough to have kids that grew up into, I guess, semi-adulthood without needing all of these extra supplements, like leg braces or walking sticks or, you know, things to help with their heart. That is stretching even my, plausibility meter here.
Yeah, in order to have a race of giants, you would have to have them be significantly morphologically distinct from Homo sapiens beyond just an isometric scaling. And by isometric, it basically means the shape doesn't change, right?
Yeah.
So there's a reason that when you get animals that are really, really big, they change their shape versus their smaller relatives.
Yeah, because you can't just take the slider and drag a person up until they're spaghettified. That's why you had Wadlow having heart issues, because, a human heart was only made to like scale to your proportions when it's pumping blood. And he had circulation issues because his heart, even though, it was slightly larger than a normal human, was still struggling to keep up with all the extra like mileage that it was having to compensate for.
Right. Although I will say, you can make a spaghetti man if you use the sliders right in like Ark Survival Evolved. I know, I've done it.
Yeah.
But
or
real
if you're
life,
doing Monster Factory videos.
Yeah, well, basically.
The Dwayne Johnson.
The bones tell the tale.
Okay.
The bones tell the tale. Extremely ancient human remains have been found throughout New York State and New England that date to at least 9,000 BCE. I mean, okay, that doesn't seem extraordinary to me. I'm perfectly willing to say okay. A report from the Syracuse Herald Museum in 1983 said that anthropologists from Buffalo Museum of Science dug up 1,400 artifacts from a site called Phoenix Hilltop. Okay, I don't. Yeah, none of that seems okay. Here we go. Indian mound on Mount Morris in New York State, in association with the remains of a giant of enormous size. So let's see what we actually have it with. When Jesse Stanley came to the mountain Morris in 1811, an Indian mound.
Let me
Oh, sorry.
Let me
Go
skip
ahead.
through some of these because I think you're going to notice something as we go. Among the bones was a human skeleton of enormous size, the jawbone of which was so large that Adam Holslander had placed it mask-like over his own chin and jaw. Human bones of gigantic proportion were discovered in such a state of preservation as to be accurately described and measured.
What's that?
You can say things are big, and you can say, oh yeah, this jaw fit over the top of another person's jaw. How big is the person? Give us a measurement. Show us a photo. Draw something. Like,
where's
you
the
can't
actual
just say,
measurements?
oh, it's huge.
Yes.
Where's the actual measurements? That's why I highlighted this thing from the Portsmouth Herald. In 1899, it says, oh, they found a skeleton and the person was fully 9 feet tall. It says, but the bones are unusually large. Okay, so again, finding stuff like this is not common. So this idea that, oh, there's a grand conspiracy to suppress the numerous giants.
Yeah.
And if you watch a lot of videos on giants and Nephilim and all this other crap, you're going to start running into a lot of common tropes. This thing about double teeth or double rows of teeth, you'll find that very common.
Okay, I'm going to point out a thing.
Would cause humans to have double rows of teeth.
Like nothing. That's not a thing. So
like sharks.
Well, the reason sharks do is because they have a very different way that their teeth work, right?
Yeah.
So basically, as a rule, tetrapods have at most 2 areas on the top and 1 area on the bottom where teeth can grow. On the top teeth, you'll see this in some like reptiles. There can be an inner row of teeth on the top jaw, but that's almost completely absent in modern reptiles, and it never made its way much past very, very basal synapsids. There are no mammals with this thing. Basically, Godzilla's the only guy who gets to have double rows of teeth on the top and bottom, ever. And really only in the Millennium era, so... Or wait, no, didn't he have some in the show, I'm not sure, but the Heisei era? Yeah, I think he did have some double teeth in some Heisei movies. Anyway, still, only Godzilla. So, yeah.
Yeah, and again, even though it pains me to say this as well, Godzilla's not real.
You shut your mouth.
I'm just kidding.
I saw him on the TV.
Godzilla, I love you.
I saw him on the TV.
Yeah, he was fighting Monkey.
Yeah, and soon he's going to be fighting the Power Rangers. I don't know if you know. That's coming.
Yep.
Godzilla versus Power Rangers is a thing that's happening, guys. Anyway.
Kaiju Cinematic Universe.
Well, so that's actually a separate thing that's also happening.
I know. I'm excited. The Monsterverse. I'm here for it.
The Japanese version of the Monsterverse. It's going to have, like, Evangelion and Ultraman and maybe Super Sentai.
Yeah,
okay, so skeletons of an Indian 7 feet tall. Okay, so
7 feet's not that, like,
yeah,
I mean, it's outside the norm, but it's not impossible or implausible.
Yeah, that's all seems
but again,
fine.
The Baltimore American is not a scientific journal, so it's not telling you how old that person was at the time they were buried. It's not telling you if they had degeneration of any of their, physical structures, or if it had any other mutations. You can't just say, big skeleton, race of giants. You have to, go more into depth with the stuff. So until I can dig up the Maryland Academy of Sciences report on this, I believe you can find a skeleton that big, but it doesn't automatically mean that there's a race of giants that are being suppressed by the evil Smithsonian.
I also before the coming of the white man, the site was occupied by a village of Indians of great stature, some of them 6.5 to 7 feet tall. It was okay.
6.5.
First of all, that doesn't count as a giant by this guy's own requirements, right? So there were tall people somewhere at some time isn't the same as there was a race of giant Ubermenschen ruling over the Americas as god kings. That's not how this works.
That's essentially what he's saying. he does go into that later on. He talks about like, oh, they were royal and they were worshipped, but they were also cannibals. And oh man, it's crazy. This book goes off the rails, man.
Wait, it's my birthday? I'll take it.
Is it?
I mean, Yaroslavs thinks so.
Very, very merry unbirthday to you.
Oh, come on. Be nice. It's my birthday, not my unbirthday, apparently. It's actually
Is it really your birthday, though?
No, my birthday's in June.
I thought your birthday was in the fall.
No, it's in June.
Oh, it's in June?
Yeah.
Really? Okay.
I had a birthday stream last year.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So now we have another skeleton that's maybe 7 or more. You know what? I might be 3 feet or more tall. Great.
Exactly.
Like...
Again, the whole thing of there not being specific measurements. It's like, oh, it might be 7 or more feet. It's like, well, was it 7 feet 1 inch or was it 7 feet 11?
Yeah.
Like, come on.
And the other thing is, look, if you want to tell me about an archaeological find, you can't just take a newspaper clipping about it. I need to know who found it, where did they find it, what's the site map, what was the context of this find, what are the measurements. The thing is, when you do archaeology, you publish these things, you take measurements, in the age before photography, you take careful sketches. Now that we have photography, you just take photographs, you publish them in actual peer-reviewed archaeology journals. Newspapers can print pretty much whatever they want about pretty much anything.
Yeah.
And back in 1956...
This is from the...
Just
yeah,
as
1956,
today,
man.
Yeah, just as today... science reporting is crap. Like, I can't even count how many times I see an article that says, new discovery overturns everything we thought we knew about evolution. And what actually happened was like a perfectly normal, very much predicted find that everyone was expecting. Like, oh, hey, look, they found a new species of Neoceratopsian. Or at the most, it's like, oh, hey, we found a hominin footprint in, like, Israel that's like 5,000 years older than the previous oldest find. And it's just like, okay, I guess Homo erectus made it to Israel slightly earlier than we thought.
Oh no.
Oh, everything about evolution has been overturned.
Destroyed.
We're ruined.
I know.
Everybody turn back in your PhDs.
Venerable Bede's like right on the money with this. Provenance is extremely important.
Mm-hmm. If you don't have provenance, your find means literally nothing, which is one of the reasons that the Ica stones mean literally nothing, because none of the extraordinary ones have provenance.
Yep.
Okay.
So
who's Nicholas Ginger and why is he highlighted?
I was looking up Nicholas Ginger and I did not get this far back before the stream started.
Oh, very disappointed.
I highlighted it because I was like, who's this person? Are they an actual, anthropologist?
Right.
I can do a real quick search just to see.
Well, while you do that, we'll go along and see what else we have, because, I mean, most of these have the same problem, right? 49 skeletons were exhumed, the tallest being 8 feet tall. Okay, what was the average height? Do you have provenance? Who did this?
So, unsurprisingly, most of the references to Nicholas Ginger are from this book when you look online.
Shocking.
However, I will say I did find a scientific report that's being hosted on the Maryland.gov website. And it's about the Hughes site, an Aboriginal village on the Potomac River in Montgomery County, Maryland, dated from January 1940, published by the Natural History Society of Maryland. So there is verifiable evidence. There's some site sketches.
Do we have any...
there's maps. Yay! I'm going to download this and send it to you.
All right. Do we have...
It's actually got site sketches.
At your first blush, though, any humans who are giants that you're seeing?
Let me scroll down.
Okay.
Let's see. It's about shards of pottery, arrow points, bowls. There's more ornaments. Looking for anything about skeletons or human remains. Oh, they even have sketches of like the luck handles and pottery shards. That's good. See, this is good science.
There you go.
I did send you the PDF as well.
Nice.
Okay, stone objects. Conclusion. Okay, skeletons does not seem to indicate any great age for its occupancy. Nevertheless, as there were no objects of European manufacture found, it would seem that the village was occupied before the arrival of the two white men.
Which two white men?
Or the white man.
Oh,
So-
I was gonna say, like, is this two particular individuals that I should know about?
Just sorry, the scan is really not super great quality, but sketches or photos maybe. It looks like photos of the skeletons. Cool.
Well, you look.
No thing is provided for scale. Great.
Of course. So now we just
let's
have
see.
whoever wrote this to go with it.
Well, page 25 of that report actually will show you some skeletons, but it doesn't have little rulers and shit for you to measure the scale. Unlike the
Of
pottery shards, that'd been nice.
So basically, what I'm getting
Nope.
is pretty much all of these. We're not actually given sufficient citations to say. Although, this is interesting. Wait, Cardiff Giant. Is there a Cardiff, Ohio that I don't know about? Guys, in the chat, tell me if there's a Cardiff, Ohio. Double check. Because I've never heard of a Cardiff, Ohio. But, I mean, that doesn't mean there isn't one. You can find all sorts of weird European city names all over the United States. So, let's see. On Tuesday morning, blah, 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 excavation. Brought to light a sword measured 9 feet in length. Yeah, I'm going to press X to doubt on 9-foot-long swords presumably made of metal in the United States. Curiosity incited them to enlarge the hole, and after some little time, they discovered the bones of 2 enormous feet. Following up the, quote, lead they had so unexpectedly struck in a few hours, they had unearthed well-preserved remains of an enormous giant belonging to a species of the human family, which probably inhabited this and other parts of the world at the time the Bible speaks of when it says there were giants in those days. I'm taking a drink of coffee because that was dumb.
The helmet is said to be the shape of those among the ruins of Nineveh.
The bones of the skeleton are remarkable white. The teeth are all in their place and are at all of extraordinary size. Well, I mean, yeah, if you had an extraordinarily big head, you'd probably have extraordinarily big teeth. That kind of checks out. These relics have been taken to Tionesta, where they are visited by large numbers of people daily. When this giant ship was in the flesh, he must have stood 18 feet tall.
18 feet tall.
Okay.
Impossible.
I mean, that would make sense for the 9-foot sword, I guess. But, yeah, you can't have an 18-foot tall human. Physically, humans can't get that big. They would die long before they grew that big. So even if you had a human who was on track to get to 18 feet by the time they stopped growing, which means, this guy's probably like 10 feet tall at like 10 years old, right? You're going to die before you hit probably 9 feet. Like,
Growing a foot per year.
yeah, this is... Well, no. Maybe the 18-foot tall giants start out tall, right? Like,
yeah, of course.
Because you got to remember, the giant 18-foot tall women can have bigger babies because they have much bigger hips.
Right.
That's what they talk. That's what they mean by childbearing hips. It's when you have like a 5-foot wide hip.
Good God.
Pop out a gigantic baby at that point.
They just come out fully formed like baby giraffes.
So congratulations, your newborn is 40 pounds.
Woo!
Yeah. What if they lived in outer space? Okay, yeah, sure. You know what? Living in outer space would greatly reduce all the problems with your heart not being big enough to pump blood that far up and down, and your bones breaking under your own weight and stuff like that. So, sure, if we want to say that there are going to be people in the future who grow up and live for generations in microgravity, they could probably get a whole lot taller. But they also couldn't survive on Earth because they would be crushed by their own weight and their fragile bones. Yeah, as far as there was a question earlier about Kent Hovind and dyslexia and his beliefs, and no, dyslexia doesn't excuse intellectual dishonesty. Dyslexia is a learning disability, and you can overcome it and become someone who is still an expert in various fields, even while you still are dyslexic. And also, I'm going to point out, I didn't say Kent Hovind was dyslexic. I said he's functionally illiterate. I do think that he
those are
could
different.
be dyslexic. I don't know. But you can be functionally illiterate without being dyslexic.
Can you also kind of give parameters for what functionally illiterate means in this context?
So people who are functionally illiterate typically can do things like sign their names. They can usually navigate things like menus or like a to-do list. But they have virtually no ability to go through a text that's arranged into like actual blocks of paragraphs following arguments, having unusual words that are difficult, like, you know, vocabulary words and whatnot. And so they tend to be so unpracticed at reading that reading like a novel is usually beyond them. They're not going to be able to get through it. And a lot of people who are functionally illiterate actually can make it pretty far in life. They can get good jobs doing, you know, usually not super intellectual work, but still good paying money, stuff like that. And it's usually a matter of poor education or simply inattention during your education that comes to functional literacy. So it's not so much that they're just completely incapable of reading, it's that they only function well at the most basic of reading tasks. They'll need help to do things like read through a contract or understand a novel, but, you know, they can order at McDonald's.
Will, for what it's worth, I'm gonna at least call myself skeptical that he's functionally illiterate, only because he's in the past gone through high school science textbooks to highlight passages he feels are wrong or stupid or outdated or
counterpoint,
you know, whatever. And he does read
here's my counterpoint,
like those shitty books about like conspiracies and things, but
here's my counterpoint. When he did that about the Big Bang, he actually went to a paragraph about the nebular hypothesis of the formation of the solar system and highlighted that and then thought it was about the Big Bang.
Well, not understanding it is quite a different thing. But he does, you know, he does read, remember that book that really pissed you off so much that we had to stop the stream?
I don't think he read that. I think he just knows about it. I think all of this can be explained by still him being functionally illiterate and occasionally having people read things to him or explain things to him, and then he just goes with it. But anyway, we're not here to talk about Kent Hovind, gosh darn it.
Anyway, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I'm going to dismiss out of hand the idea of an 18-foot tall person with exceptionally white bones for whatever that's worth. I don't know why it matters. Okay, so
not tarnished by the soil, not bleached in the sun.
Yeah, just
ow.
Apparently just like bones made of chalk. That's what I'm going to go with.
Yeah.
Licking County. That's an interesting name. Centerburg, Ohio. Licking County. Sorry. Change your name, guys. That's ridiculous. Has been for years a favorite field for students of Indian history. Last week, a small mound near Homer was opened up by some schoolboys. So one of the things I want to point out is, look how many of these involve some mound, right? That's because that's where these conspiracies started, way back in, like, the 18th century. Today, further research is found for huge skeletons, 3 being over 7 feet in length and the other full 8 feet. So, yeah, on a bed of charcoal, over which are numerous burned bones. Yet again, where is it? So my problem with basically this entire book is it's like a series of newspaper stories is not evidence. It's just not. Now, don't get me wrong. There are areas where newspaper stories can be evidence. That's this thing that isn't a science, but it is a rigorous scholarly pursuit, and it's called history. And in history, newspapers can be important sources. But when you're talking about the prehistoric inhabitation of the Americas by giants, newspapers don't mean anything. And also, yeah, as Joseph Turco says, 7 feet is actually not that crazy. People are 7 feet tall.
Yeah, it's not. We've got lots of basketball players that are 7 feet, so...
Yeah. The existence of 7 foot tall Native Americans in the past in no way indicates the idea of a race of giants who were of unfeasible height. So now we have another one. Let's see. A short distance from Tippecanoe City, Ohio. measures 8 feet from the top of his head to his ankles. The feet being missing, says this newspaper reporter. The skull is large enough to fit as a helmet over the average man's head. The skeleton was one of 7 buried in a circle, the feet of all being towards the center, except they were cut off. Rude implements were near. The skeletons were thought to be those of mound builders. So again, we still have the mound builder myth here in 1904. How are these arranged? Like, we've got 1885, we had like something from the 1950s, now we're in 1904.
They're all over the road.
Okay, so
yeah, he's all over the road.
There's no like organization.
Yep.
Well, that's fun.
Like,
so by the way, Caliban says there's no
burial mounds at first, and then he'll go on to a different topic and talk about like, I think he goes on to a section about like their teeth and how their their skulls can fit like helmets.
Caliban says
it's not in chronological order.
There is no Cardiff in Ohio, but there is one in Pennsylvania. So yeah, I don't know how we got that Cardiff in Ohio from earlier, but okay. So now we have gigantic man buried next to ferocious panther, which is fun. Okay, so the skeleton of a very large individual. How large? Yeah. What does that mean?
It doesn't say at any point.
Oh, goodness. 43 mounds opened. Again, more with the mounds, and especially in, where are we? 1889, which is a time when it was a widespread belief that the mounds were built by then current Native American civilizations. Yeah. So basically this was, and also it was a time of a ridiculous number of fake archaeological finds. People were faking all sorts of stuff, because the thing is, in 1889 in the United States, archaeology was very hard to distinguish archaeology from just profiteering grave robbing. People were just opening up what would now be archaeological sites with no thought to things like permits or permission from local communities or anything like that. They were finding things and also fabricating things, selling them with dubious provenance. There was essentially no checks on this behavior. There were no regulations on it. And you could say almost anything. So,
remember at the beginning when I talked about the missing context of the bone wars and people just trying to get rich and make a name for themselves?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So let's see. We got some highlighted stuff here.
You did mention Alish Hrdlichka.
Mm-hmm, I did.
I did want to bring him back because he does reappear slightly further down in these sections. Okay, let me skip down the discoveries of Aaron Wright. It's gone down the history books as the discovery of the Conant Giants, the unusually large-boned inhabitants of Ashtabula County, Ohio. I was trying to find the sources for Harvey Middleton, and I did actually find the source of his reports. Oh. So it's in the Canute Public Library, and it was apparently taken from the Geneva Times newspaper. It's in the northeast part of Ohio, and he talks about just a quote. This is good. The settlers, not being very deeply impressed with the dignity of their public edifices, meaning of the natives, converted their council house into a barn and their king's palace into an aviary or a hen roost. Let's see. They talk about how they kicked out the natives. Settlers are being jerks. And
that seems very far-fetched. European settlers being jerks to Native Americans? That would never happen.
I'll put it in the side chat for those who want to read it later. And he discusses there were depressions made by Aaron Wright Esquire as early as 1800, which were found to contain human bones blackened with time, which on exposure to the air soon crumbled to dust.
Okay, did you see what Silver Harlow just said, though? POUSs? People of unusual size? I don't believe in them.
Yeah.
Very, very nice Princess Bride reference. I love the Princess Bride references. One of the greatest movies out there.
Let me see if I can search. Okay.
All right.
Mounds that were situated in the eastern part of what is now the village of Canute and the extensive burying ground near the Presbyterian Church appear to have no connection with the burying places of the Indians. So again, these mounds couldn't have been built by the Indians. The doubtless refer to a more remote period, and the relics are of an extinct race of whom the Indians had no knowledge. These mounds were of a comparatively small size and of the same general character of those that are widely scattered around the country. What is most remarkable is that among the quantity of human bones they contain, there are found specimens belonging to men of large stature who must have been nearly allied to a race of giants. Skulls were taken from these mounds, and the cavities of which were sufficient capacity to admit the head of an ordinary man, and jawbones that might be fitted on or over the face with equal facility. The bones of the arms and lower limbs were of the same proportions, exhibiting ocular proof of the degeneracy of the human race since the period in which these men occupied the soil which we now inhabit.
Yeah.
So he talks about their pagan practices and other things like that, but it's...
So, once again, this is the 1800s. Actual 1800. Just buying into this myth that the Native Americans weren't responsible for the mounds. And the thing is, there's some truth to that, because the cultures that Europeans found when they first came to, the eastern seaboard of North America and started spreading west were not the same cultures that built the mounds. That culture had ceased to exist around 1,000 years before the Europeans got there. So it's not like it's completely unreasonable to say, hey, these people didn't do this, because they literally didn't, right? Mound building had ceased for a long time, because the mound building culture had ceased to be active. Now, we did later find from actual scientific and archaeological finds that the people who were doing the mound building were related to the people who then settled, or sorry, not settled, but the Native Americans who then lived in those areas later, right? Cultures change. That's just a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, one similar thing that you can point to in, say, European history is dolmen building. Dolmens, which are these big sort of, not quite megalithic, but they're made out of relatively large stones, were burial structures that you could find all throughout Western Europe. But the dolmen building culture went away before even like the Roman conquest of these areas. Like, it's deep in prehistory that this dolmen building culture went away. That doesn't mean that the Europeans there got dumber because they couldn't build dolmens anymore. It doesn't even mean they couldn't. They just didn't. That's all it takes. And so, yeah, it created all these weird conspiracy theories, and a whole lot of these are just hundreds of years old newspaper stories buying in to this ridiculous and rather racist idea.
Yeah.
Which is, again, we have
the next
1829.
About 1829. It's much of the same. I did find that report as at least part of it. Scrolling down, there's a little sketch. Fort Hill, which is nice.
Ooh.
So EA for a sketch. A couple more things.
I will say these sketched maps are actually pretty nice.
Yeah, they are. So I did send you the original article about the giant found in Georgia. So if you want to pull that up.
Actually, we're getting to the point where I think we're going to have to wrap it up pretty soon.
Okay. Well, I actually, in my quest to find somebody giving scale or proportions to these freaking giants, quote unquote, I actually found one single instance of any kind of illustration or photograph. And it was in the article that I sent you that we're probably going to pick up with whenever you decide to resume this for the giants found in Georgia.
Okay. Well, that will be fun, and we will definitely take a look at that. So there was a question from Yaroslav about North American fauna. So there's a few things. First, there was Panthera atrox or Panthera leo atrox, which is the American lion. The reason that I say that there's those two options, Panthera leo atrox, that would be interpreting it as a subspecies of the lion, Panthera leo. But there are also people who say it was a distinct species, Panthera atrox. It was larger than the African lion. And that's about all I remember about it, besides the fact that there's controversy as to whether it's a species or a subspecies. But you also asked about a cheetah. There was an animal called the American cheetah, but it's actually not very closely related to the African cheetah. So the American cheetah, which is the genus Miracinonyx, I believe it's Miracinonyx, is actually more closely related to the modern puma or cougar or mountain lion or whatever you call it, because it has a lot of common names, than it is to the modern cheetah. However, it convergently evolved a lot of similar adaptations, like very long legs, a long tail for balance, a very flexible spine for running, and it probably hunted in a manner similar to the modern cheetah. So, there you go. There's some North American felid, like paleo felid information. Also, my favorite extinct North American carnivoran is the short-faced bear from the subfamily Tremarctinae, of which only one species remains, the South American spectacled bear, the only Tremarctine bear left. So that's also why it's basically my favorite bear, the spectacled bear.
Nice.
Because it's a member of my favorite Ursid subfamily. Anyway, Vishanti.
Don Giovanni asks, are we sure the dolmens weren't built by well-enveloped Gauls that fell in magic potion as a child?
No, we're not sure. But I don't see any reason to accept that. So, what do you have coming up, Vishanti? Is there anything that you want to plug?
Tonight, on NASA Bunker 33, we're going to be dunking on JM Truth. And
easy target, but
there's
fun.
just, never-ending supply of dumb coming from that guy. And, among his numerous failures, chief of which is 10 to the negative 17 is a negative number, is that he doesn't know shit about shit when it comes to Hebrew. And this guy is...
You mean the Torah-compliant Christian doesn't know anything about the Torah?
I'm being very charitable when I say that, because he's one of those people who would probably self-identify as Messianic, but he's not Jewish. Like, he's not. By anyone's halakha.
He's not Jewish, he's just Torah-compliant, quotation marks.
Yeah, he's just cosplaying a Jew, but yeah,
literally
he doesn't
in
know
some cases.
anything about... He doesn't know anything about Hebrew. He doesn't know how to do, like, Jewish exegesis or anything like that. So I'm gonna have some not fun with that tonight.
Yeah, my goodness. The Venerable Beat says the puma and cheetah are sister taxa, by the way. I would have to double check that. That doesn't sound obviously wrong. But even so, the American cheetah is closer to the puma and more... The cheetah-like morphology is convergent even with those relations there, because the cougar is a relatively primitive member of Felidae. Anyway.
Put that link in the side chat. There you go if you want to watch it.
So on this channel, right now, as I've been streaming this, the next speculative evolution video has been rendering. It took longer than I was expecting, because in addition to the art taking a while, then construction work started right outside where I record. And so, like, my window for recording suddenly just shrank a whole lot right as I was about to start recording all of the stuff. Fortunately, a couple of my patrons stepped up and helped with some voice acting for that. So, a special thanks to Saurus Blooded and Space Dragon, who gave me some audio that yeah, so you're going to hear their voices in that. I did most of the audio, but there was just some that I was just like, I don't have time. Can you guys help out? They did, so thank you very much to you guys. And that should be out on Thursday. So Tuesday, the plan is to have a Jackson with Jackson. So if you like Jackson Wheat, he should be on the channel at Tuesday at 5 Pacific, which is, what is that, 8 Eastern? Yeah, 8 Eastern.
Mm-hmm.
Then Saturday, I don't know. We might follow up on this. We might do something else. Maybe I'll do nothing. You can't tell. And then that's Sunday. I'm actually going to be having a talk with Jackson, I believe on his channel, with a young Earth creationist who runs the channel Paleologos. And we're going to be talking about paleontology and whatnot. So I don't actually have a firm time for that, but when I do, I will make sure to share it. So with that, I want to say thanks again, everybody, and I hope that I will see you all on Tuesday and Thursday and probably Saturday. Bye.
Yeehaw.
I just want to take a minute to thank my channel members and patrons, especially those pledging $20 or above: Bob Knob, Bent Hovend, Denny5252, Ian Chen, John Ackerman, Chris Love, Landon Knoll, Lingway, Sphincter of Doom, The Venerable Veed, and Patrick Dennis. The people whose names you see on screen right now are a big part of keeping the lights on here at Casa Dino, and without them, this channel really wouldn't exist in the form that it does now. If you'd like to join this awesome team, there are links down in the description to join the channel or to join my Patreon. It starts at only $1 on Patreon or $1.99 here on YouTube. There's also a convenient join button right below this video if you want to join as a member on YouTube. Joining lets you see most of my videos early, in some cases more than a month early. Also, you can join an exclusive member and patron-only Discord server, which has a pretty direct line to me. And as you go up in tier, you get more and more benefits, including getting your name on this list. If a monthly subscription isn't really for you, but you still like to help out the channel, there's a merch store linked in the description. It has t-shirts, it has baby onesies, it has mugs, it has blankets, anything you want, Dapper Dino branded. And if none of that seems right for you, please just like and share my videos and subscribe to the channel. That helps immensely. Thank you very much.